Hello, and welcome to the Heartbeat of the Dance Floor. Today, I welcome the lovely Miss Christina Visca to our show. Christina is probably best known as one of the creators of the original Sound Factory here in New York City. Our friendship goes way back to the early 80s, though, with my career transitioning into being exclusively in lighting, while Christina was establishing herself as a hostess and front door personality to many of the special party nights at major clubs in the city, like Studio 54 and the Palladium. In 1988, Christina became one of the creators and founders of the original Sound Factory on West 27th Street in New York City. Over the years, she has made a name for herself as one of New York City's premier party impresarios, creating such memorable event series like Trippin' on the Moon, and most recently her birdcage parties at the Standard in Greenwich Village. It is with great pleasure that I have as my guest my dear friend, Ms. Christina Visca. Christina, welcome to the Heartbeat of the Dance Floor.
Miss Marsha Stern, thank you. I'm so excited you're having me on your show.
Oh, yeah, it's a delight. You've got such a great, rich history in our club industry. And for those that aren't New Yorkers and aren't familiar with you, please tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the things that you've done over the years, your beginnings, etc.
Gee, I think we need a 5-part series, but I'll try to keep it brief as possible. I never planned to get into the nightclub business. It was an interesting, and I like to call it organic. I was a student at FIT, and before FIT, I was going out a little bit, but FIT really got me. I called Studio 54 and Xenon our campus parties. They were actually very smart with marketing. They used to invite FIT students on Thursdays for free. So when patrons came in, they had kind of a club filled with fashionable young kids. Pretty smart marketing.
Very clever.
And just on my own, I've always been friendly and gregarious with everyone. And, within a couple of weeks, I was best friends with the door person and the security guards. And in fact, Chuck Gerlich, who we're still friends with today, right?
Sure. Yeah, dear friend.
It was just sort of a natural progression for me. And it really took off. I'm a Peter Gatien discovery. In 1983, when he opened Limelight, I used to go, and just knowing a couple of the people there, those were the early 80s. You'd get out of the cab, they'd call your name, the crowd would part calling you. So it was so much fun for me. And Peter noticed me, and he said, I think you need to give parties in my club. And, how do you turn that down at 19 years old?
No, you don't.
And I started giving parties in the library at the Limelight.
And the Limelight was a really hot club back then. It was across the street from the Danceteria. It had a lot of crisscross traffic. It was really one of the cultural hubbubs in the early 80s.
It did. And it was the library there was really, the word VIP is kind of thrown around, but on a nightly basis was, built. I don't want to say older because I really don't look at age, but you had people like Liberace, Shirley MacLaine, Billy Idol, Michael Douglas, like real, not club celebrities, if you will.
Sure.
So that was like a really nice place for me to get my start. And just from there, it kind of snowballed on. I was asked to do the door at some major clubs. I worked at the Palladium under Steve Rubellini and Schrager. I worked at
Stanley Burke, right?
And I worked with Stanley Burke, right? I did the gay night. I worked on other nights, but the main night for me was Stephen Cohen's gay night with Stanley Burke. And, yes. I look at Sunday night parties now, and I am probably 5,000 people every Sunday night. It was pretty major.
Yeah, it was. And our friend, to repeat the name, Chuck Gerlich, also head of security and ran the door crew at Palladium.
And all these people I've kept in touch with throughout the years, which is really amazing. I went to 1018 under Gene Danino. I ran that door for a couple of years. And then I worked at Studio 54 in the latter years. And I went to all the, it was the 80s. So, I was out probably 6 nights a week at all different sorts of clubs, from Danceteria area. I even was at the Devil's Nest up in the Bronx, Club A. You name it. If there was a good, and that's what was so beautiful. I'm kind of segueing is that, you could go out every night and it was a bit different. And I really felt at home was felt at home and accepted everywhere. But I would say
Exactly.
the two clubs that
Exactly.
made the most impact on me, were the Saints and the Paradise Garage, which were membership only clubs, very kind of polar opposites. The Saint was predominantly white male. I mean, both were gay.
You were my guest, permanent guest, and the second season sponsored your membership to the Saint,
It's
which
all
was
your
great.
fault, Marsha, I always say.
Well, it's partially my fault. I'm not going to take all the blame. And the Paradise Garage also was a membership club, but it was interesting because it
Correct.
had a predominantly gay crowd on one night and a predominantly straight crowd on another night. But
That's right.
the overlap was, and of all three places you mentioned, the overlap was that people went for the experience, the musical journey, sometimes the lighting that accompanied it,
That's right.
and your friendship and your core of people, your tribe, and you went for that feeling that each club gave. And while both the Saint and Paradise Garage were uber successful and the predominant private clubs of 1982, 1983, absolutely.
Right.
Each what they were night and day. I mean, I like to say they both had my true definition of what a heartbeat is, but they were so different at the same time. They were
Right.
so the same.
And I have to say, I was one of the few people that would go back and forth to both. Some people were like, "Oh, you go to the Saint too, or you go to
I
the
did
Paradise?" Yeah,
too.
yeah, we did the same thing.
I
But
did too.
I
Sometimes
know,
on the same night.
I know. It was really that they closed. I mean, they were probably the two best nightclubs in the world, really. Let's be frank here, right? At that moment in time. And those two clubs closed, unfortunately, within a year of one another. And
Yes.
it left a big void. So how I kind of stepped in is when the Paradise Garage closed, and most people were kind of, sitting around, boo hoo, what are we going to do? The garage is closed. I kind of took action. I
Let's
knew I
take our
wanted to
listeners.
continue.
I
And
want to give our listeners a timeline. We're talking 87-ish,
87,
88. Yes, 87.
September, September of 87. So
Okay,
the next week I had a party planned. So I didn't sit idle. I was like, "Hey, come to my party, come to my party." And to much surprise, I shouldn't say surprise. It was an overwhelming success. It was in a little club called Black Market. I called the party the Space, and it took off like wildfire. And it's there that not that I met Junior Vasquez, but where he first played for me. I knew that he was an aspiring DJ. I had heard him he played for Keith. The place I learned about his DJing skills, he played for Keith Haring at the opening of the Carmine Street Pool when he painted the mural.
Okay, yeah.
I said, "Oh, I didn't know you. I knew he was an aspiring DJ, but he was really good." So he had asked me if he could play for me. I said, "Sure, why not? I'll give you a chance." And he just blew me and everybody away.
Well, I
And
remember your space parties.
yeah, and from that moment on, we became partners, and we quickly outgrew that space. And then we went to Open Baseline, which was on 21 Hudson Street in Tribeca, another mega hit. I mean,
Yeah.
literally, we had to close in about, I think Baseline was less than a year. I mean, we had lines around the corner and we're pretty much shut down for overcrowding. I mean, and we had like major show. I mean, I even had like Imagination perform there in the basement. It was incredible. So we kept outgrowing spaces, and ultimately, we opened up Sound Factory. We found the space, created it, named it, the whole nine yards. So that was really the pinnacle and the culmination of my years coming up in the ranks, if you will, in the nightclub business.
And
And
to give our listeners a little perspective here, we're talking from an intimate space that housed a few hundred people to a warehouse type space that
that's right.
housed
It
probably
was
a
about,
thousand or more. It was
that's
quite,
right.
and it was substantial space, like the Paradise Garage was substantial
That's
space.
right. It was about 12,000 square feet. And, it grew. It wasn't, we had, In the old way, what we used to do, you do construction parties, invite people along the way, have a soft opening. But I have to say, the opening, our soft openings were just that. It was friends and family, and that nightclub built. Little by little, it grew, and
Yeah.
that's a little bit of the difference about nightclubs today. Also, there's a million investors. They're all about numbers and money, and there is sustainability in building something for longevity, and that's what we did.
So would you say then part of your mission, if you will, when you not only created Sound Factory, but all of your endeavors leading up to it and your parties that you produce and host since, would you say that that's more to create, how do I phrase this? To do it at more of an altruistic matter, to create a heartbeat, to create an interaction, something that you're giving the community, as opposed to something that's tangible that is only there to give to you?
Well, it's funny you bring that up because I never got into this business to make a career out of it or to make money. I mean, to this day, it's
Okay,
really
to my
like
point, yeah.
I keep using the word organic. It's just what I did kept snowballing. And all along until I opened up Baseline, I was in the retail. I was a manager at Bergdorf Goodman. I worked at Barney's. I worked in the garment center. And yeah, I did a lot of things in the fashion world before. And up until Baseline, I was working both jobs.
Yeah, when we first met,
Yeah.
way back in the day, and I do remember you were in retail, and then also when you got into real estate as well, which is your
Right.
current quote unquote profession, which you've been doing for over 20 years.
The
So,
real estate I got into after Sound Factory, but it was yeah, so the money came along with it, which was great, but it was never the intention like business people today. Oh, I want to open up a club and make all this money. I'll tell you, I created when the garage closed and then later on the Saint, I created a place where I wanted to go. I'm a patron myself.
mhm.
And again, I'm not this business guy or corporation wanting to. I knew what I wanted the sound to be. I knew what I wanted the bathrooms to be like. I knew I didn't want a glitzy club. I wanted good sound and great people. I didn't want them, so I created what I wanted. And, the old saying, build it and they will come. So I
Well,
basically fashioned it under something that I would love to go to. I fashioned it after the Saint in the Garage for the membership. And I think the biggest thing you take away from that is community.
yes,
I know this is the name of your show is Heartbeat of the Dance Floor, and I really think that's the heartbeat of the dance floor, in my opinion.
I think you're right.
There's a lot of definitions of heartbeat. There's the technical one of it's a pulsation of your heart, but it also means in a split second, in a flash, and there's those heartbeat moments that I could think back and still give me goosebumps. But I think in an overall heartbeat, I think it's the community that I've created and others before me have created.
And I think I would agree with you 100,000%. Interesting. I was speaking with David DePino, who you know from Paradise Garage, and
Of course, I
also
love David.
DJ, and also was a DJ at Sound Factory, various incarnations of it.
Sure.
And he actually said very similar, and he put his finger on community as well. And that is, I think, one of the similarities. You speak of the Saint and the Garage and Sound Factory, and today I don't know if there are clubs and venues that are being built to house the community. Back then, it was made with the community in mind. You used the resources that you had at hand, and you did it for the greater good.
Correct. And you needed community because there was no social media. You had a mailing list, and I opened up Sound Factory on my black book. I made phone
And
calls.
I would also add Michael Fesco to that list.
Of course.
Even though he himself didn't own a club, he set standards. He created, at Flamingo, just an iconic precursor to the Saint.
Right.
and then a series of incredible events and parties, and they live on today with his CTs that are
Of
being
course,
run by his partner. I think Doug was his partner
which
when
which
sadly
we're
we
gonna
lost
hopefully
Michael.
go, which you and
Sadly
I
we
are gonna
lost
hopefully
Michael a
go
couple of
on
years
Monday.
ago, and
Yeah.
but yeah, it's kind of interesting
And
how
even
you
with, and when,
start
and
something. I'm
with the
sorry.
membership, even with the membership, there's a sense of belonging. With your membership and meeting the owner, and you had to be, you had to speak to me or Junior or whatever to get your membership. So we knew everyone. There was really a community feeling, and I take it for granted back then the crowd that we had, and even at the garage, black, Spanish, gay, a lot of trans, drag queens, everything is
Very
it,
all across the board, and it was all a
and
completely equal playing ground and footing. We were all there
it
for the
was
same reason,
it
to
was artistic,
dance.
right? It was artistic freedom. It was combined with art and fashion, but it also gave these people a home every Sunday where they felt safe, they could be themselves. And there were a lot of clubs like that, but like I said, the Garage and Sound Factory really gave them their homes like that. And I'm proud to say Sound Factory was the Paradise Garage for the next generation.
It was, in
It,
fact, since it was so close to the 90s, it really did live through the 90s, and it was that next decade's version.
sure.
And I don't know if there are any clubs in New York City that exist today like what we knew. I think that Sound Factory may have been the last of that generation that started in the late 60s, early 70s with the Sanctuary and with
Correct. Yep.
places like Nikki's Gallery, etc.
Right.
And I don't know. I guess that's my job as a nightlife historian to figure out, but I do believe that Sound Factory was the last of the
Okay.
large.
I always tell people because we all put our own money into it back then, and it's a different game today. But I always laugh and say, imagine if I wanted to. Listen, you can never recreate it. It's a different time and place. But imagine if I was to go to an investor today and say, hey, I want to open up a 10,000, 12,000 square foot club, only going to be open 2 nights a week and no alcohol.
They'd laugh you out the door.
Could you imagine? They'd be like, this chick's crazy. But
and
the,
and it's going to cost you $10 million for me to build it,
what?
which back then was pretty much the equivalent of, I guess, what Bruce spent to build the Saint.
Correct. Well, and
You have
so
to account
people,
for inflation. I think.
people would laugh at that today, but look at the longevity that it had, and it set a new bar, and I hate the word legendary is thrown around, but it is, and we
It
built,
is.
yeah,
It
and
is.
we
And it created a culture which, you're right, it has sustained itself, it has permeated, it has evolved, it moved on to Saint at large parties. I
right.
think a lot of the big circuit parties of the early 2000s and late 1990s sprouted from the Saint at large parties of the
Sure.
late 80s and early 90s. I
It's
mean,
probably one of the last clubs that had, we spoke, a residence, a Facebook. I mean, back in the day, Rudolph was, Danceteria, Peter was Limelight, I was
yes,
Sound Factory, and there was not many. There's no more residents. There's no more DJs playing weekly. No one taking chances. Some people do play monthly, and there's a few parties where I shouldn't say that where DJs do play weekly at their parties, but in a big room Saturday night kind of setting. And I miss that
yes.
too.
Like
I
a
miss.
residency. Well,
Yeah.
at least with your parties, you've taken up the slack, because I know as a participant, it's given me, my friends, my tribe, it's given us a place to go to recreate that feeling that we had when we all danced at the Saint or at the Garage or at Sound Factory or out on Fire Island or wherever. And rather than have one permanent venue, you've taken it to a new level in that you bring the party with you wherever it goes.
Right.
There may be multiple venues with the same theme. I think offhand of the Trippin' on the Mood parties, Birdcage had a home, to my knowledge, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Birdcage's home has been at the Standard for a few years now.
Yeah, almost 3 years, right? Well, then COVID
And
came.
and that's something that, as a New Yorker, you like, okay, I know where I'm going on Sunday night. I
Right.
know I can count on a Christina Visca party at the Standard at Birdcage on Sunday night. That's the plan, if you will.
Right. I mean, like I like to create, you hate to go back. It's like a Cheers, right? You want to go where everybody knows your name and they're happy that you came, right?
True,
I
very
mean,
true.
I like to think of my parties that people could come alone, that they're going to know everybody there. That's, when I used to go out, people are like, you going by yourself? I'm like, yeah, I'm meeting 1,000 friends there. It's like,
exactly. Yeah. And I think that is the very community that you refer to, the community that you give to by creating, the community that supports you by attending, by sharing. It's that interaction that, in my mind, creates the magic of the moment, creates those special heartbeats. I'm going to segue a little bit and ask you if you have any stories you'd like to tell us about perhaps any super special moments that you either witnessed or created, or maybe a little, just a background story, whether it was a party that was at one of your venues or one of the parties that you created yourself, and, just give us a little insight as to how you make magic.
There's a lot of them. I mean, obviously I have a ton of them, but one of my favorite stories, and I could tell it now because if the authorities knew what we did back then, right? And we all came out unscathed, but I could tell the story now. There was a gray area in the law back then about staying open after hours. You either had a liquor license and cabaret license, and if you had that, you had to close at 4:00. Well, you had to give patrons like a half hour to finish their cocktails. We did not have alcohol, so we were a dance hall license. But once they caught on to Sound Factory, it was all warehouses over there, and the cops, the 10th precinct, had a lot of problems. But at 4:00, they started coming into Sound Factory every week, and every week I would leave and sit in the cop car and take a ticket, which was then I'd have to go to court on Monday, and it was thrown out. But we learned, our attorney, they really couldn't shut us down. We were a cabaret license without alcohol, and we were a membership only club. Yeah. And it's funny, one of my quotes from years ago is, there's no restrictions on when you could play golf. Why are there restrictions when you could dance? Right? And it's true. So,
and you're right. It was that little narrow area where you weren't breaking the law.
Correct. Right.
But so you could legally do what you were doing. You just
but obviously
within the confines.
Obviously we were on the radar. The walls were shaking. With the music and the sound system. So
but you weren't selling liquor, and after 4, and you didn't have you
didn't have a liquor license.
Correct. They might not have liked what was going on, but there was nothing they could do about it.
That's right.
Funny about you having to take a ticket every week, though.
Oh, wait, but I haven't gotten to the good part yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But that's okay. So as we would learn that they still bothered us. So we would have lookouts or security guards on all 4 corners. They would radio and say, 5-0 is on the street, cops coming down. We would radio to Junior. We would shut the music off with 2,500 people in the room. We would shut the gates, the rolling doors. Security would be outside as though we were closed, saying, hey, what's up? We just closed. 2,500 people quiet, waiting until we got the word that the cops were off the street.
Wow.
We would get the word, and it was probably, it could be 5 minutes, it could be 15 minutes. We didn't know. Not a peep. And the minute they left the block, we'd get the signal, and boom, the music went on. I mean, wow. Really pretty incredible. That's how dedicated really. The crowd was to it too. But could you imagine everyone just sitting on the dance floor, like the music stops in the
Yeah.
middle of that drama at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then it would go back on, and they never came back
Pick
that
up,
night.
pick up like it left off. Yeah.
Right. So
Unbelievable. That's a great
that's
story.
really a highlight memory that I tell most people. It's incredible.
And what a devoted community that you had and
Uh,
that Junior had. I mean, again, very few houses where you had that kind of a resident DJ
Correct.
who had his interaction with his peeps,
Or
as it were. It was
and
like a
he,
Pied Piper.
and he commanded the dance floor. Anything he said,
Yeah.
did, whatever. I mean, that was his house.
It was his house. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Though
our house, right?
well, yes, indeed.
You know what I mean? He commanded as the DJ. I mean, it was pretty amazing.
He was the figurehead, if you will.
What?
If he was the one that gave us our musical journey that night. And as someone who has made a wonderful career out of doing lighting, I can tell you we've always taken second billing to the DJ anyway.
Of course. Well, but it's all. It takes a village. It
It
takes a
does. And
village.
I'm not
A lot of times the DJs, which they should. I mean, they're the driving force of the evening. But
well,
it,
as they say, nobody ever left a Broadway show humming the light cues. And the
that's
same
right.
thing is the same on the dance floor. So I've never had a problem with doing the lights to someone else's music. In fact, I think that if you are chosen to work with a DJ who's providing a musical journey, such as one that is in a private club like a Sound Factory, or like a Saint, or any dance floor that commands that type of a feel, you've got a huge responsibility to enhance
Of course.
their journey, not create your own. It's not about what I can do with the lights. It's about
Right,
what my lights.
you're a part of the show and enhancing his selections and whatnot. Right.
Yeah, and not for nothing, when you've got a good communication, you've got a good interaction, almost like you're both on the same wavelength, you're both in the zone, you get to another level.
Of course.
Again, another one of those components of how there are varieties of heartbeats that are out there and various levels of heartbeats. The intensity, certainly, if you
Right.
have sound and lights working in tandem with a great crowd and great management and a friendly venue, comfortable safe venue, then you reach the pinnacle of that magical moment, that perfection.
And it's something that I always loved about the Saint was that how they highlighted. People would say, "Wow, who's doing the lights tonight?" It was DJ so and so and lights by so and so, which
Yeah.
was really the first club. And now they do it now in some places. There's some superstar light guys like Ariel, and they get their props as they should.
Yes, but you're right. Back in the 70s and the 80s, when there was an invitation that went out or a listing that was shown, it was basically the DJ who was listed. The light person was about as auxiliary as a bartender. That said, there were a lot of bartenders who were the brand of the venue that they worked. A lot of people went to a place on a specific night because that was their watering hole, and that bartender, the staff is very important as well.
That's why I said it takes a village to do a good party and a good nightclub. You can't, and it's the owner's job to curate that. That's what the owner does. Or for my instance now, I'm a promoter producer. Sometimes I walk into a club where they already have their staff, but if I can tweak it a little or ask for certain people to work, like even a door person, what I used to do, the party starts at the door.
You're right. You're right.
The party starts
I think a lot of people forget that, and it's a whole different ball game now, and money is a whole different
the
ball
old door
game.
person is kind of gone. Everyone's on a line now, but we evolve and we move on, and be thankful we had those heartbeats, right?
Oh my Lord, yes. I mean, it's certainly I like to think made me a richer person, and you, and hey, brought us together as friends.
That's right, of course. Marsha, all your
Virgo sisters.
Pardon me, and Virgo sisters, right?
Indeed.
I love it.
Indeed.
I love that you're so involved in the business like me and still loved, we still have a passion for being the patron, still going out, which is, and all that's another thing, a lot of, I hate the word promoter, but I guess that's what some people might call me. I like to call myself a producer of the events, but there's a lot of promoters that you could say it's a so-and-so event, but sometimes they're not even at the party, or they're in the office, or they're sitting in a corner with a bottle with two friends. It's like, I got into this business to, like, dance, talk, hang around, chit chat with people. And so even sometimes that's a little lost these days too. It's just a business.
And it's unfortunate because when you see the person who's hosting the event, who has extended this, created, produced this event that you go to, and you see them having fun, it can't help but rub off on all of the attendees and make them want to be a part of it more and more because, there's a sincerity there, Christina.
Right.
I really do.
Or want to come see you. Oh, it's Christina's party. Let's go. And like, it's not just a business.
Correct.
I'm a person that wants to entertain everybody and see all the people that come in. Hopefully, I can't spend time with everybody, but I hope, 99.9% of the time I can say hello, thanks for coming, and it means something to people. It's, again, building a community.
Yes, and you're out there and you're enjoying yourself as much as everyone else who is there having a good time. In fact, as I speak about one of your parties, I'm going to take the liberty of putting up a photograph that when I created this series, I was trying to describe what the feeling of Heartbeat of the Dance Floor was. It was a feeling to me of euphoria, of total abandonment, of total joy. And as I was trying to describe it to a graphic artist, there was nothing I could come up with except, I've got to show you this photograph. And this was a picture that was taken at one of your events, Trippin' on the Moon events. I forget the year. And in the picture, it centers on our dear friend, DJ Warren Gluck. May he rest in peace. And if you see him with his arms spread on the dance floor, that is Warren. And to me, that is the epitome of what is that magic moment, that joy that is the heartbeat of the dance floor.
I have goosebumps. What a great photo. Wow.
This is one of your parties, darling.
Yeah. I always said, hands and arms up is a good sign, right?
Roy always said that. He said his barometer, Roy Thode, his barometer for if the crowd was enjoying themselves, if the more arms that were in the air, the better the night, the more fun they were having, the more they were enjoying themselves. And it's true because it's just a natural body expression of that abandonment, that joy, that sheer jubilation.
Wow, that's a great photo. Yeah. Nice.
It's exactly what I thought of when I was trying to put into words what I meant in creating the series and in creating the
words, as they say, right?
I'm sorry?
I said a picture paints 1,000 words.
Indeed it does. Indeed it does. Indeed. So, Christina, I want to ask you to bring us a little bit up to speed on some of the things that have been occupying your world of late. I know Birdcage is your latest endeavor, and if you've got any other wonderful magical moments and stories, please do, but bring us up a little bit into the present, and or maybe tease us on some things we can look forward to in the future. We always love a good Christina Visca event.
Thank you. I'll just start post Sound Factory days after Junior and I sold out of it. I found my way back to Peter Gatien. I managed USA in the Tunnel, 2 mega clubs, which was an amazing experience for me. And then those 2 clubs, obviously closed down after. I'm happy to say everything I've done has happened because it's closed or whatever. I've never faded or, gone down with the ship or anything. Everything has always ended on a high note for me, which I'm very grateful for. Sure. And I found my way starting to just give my own parties now, because at Sound Factory, I owned the club. It was a whole different ball game. And so I think I took a little bit of a short break after that, but In 2 years, I've been a professional in the nightclub business for 40 years. Can you believe that?
No, actually, sometimes I have to like,
1983, I gave my
wow.
first party. So yeah, 40 years. It's crazy, and still have a passion for it. I'm happy to say. But I started doing my own parties, and it's happened up until current day. I'm kind of known for the Sunday night tea thing, the tea dance hours. Although Birdcage is a little later. Some of them were disco tea at Splash, which lasted
Yes.
about 2 years, which major DJs came in there and did like a disco set. I had Lolita Holloway sing for my birthday there with Melba Moore. I mean, some major. I mean, that was a real heartbeat moment. I'll tell you that. That was
Yeah, sure,
being
sure.
on stage with Lolita and Melba Moore singing "Happy Birthday" to you. I mean, that's major. Um,
Indeed.
so I did disco tea, then I did classic tea at the old XL up on 42nd Street.
Yep.
I did a party called Sunset Discotheque on the top of Stage 48. I did a party called Tia Toy at the Gansevoort. The two latter ones also had food involved, which I adore. They were early parties, but at these sort of restaurant, rooftop kind of thing. So you could come from 6 to 12, but you could also sit and eat, have
Oh,
sushi
wow.
or, yeah. So, dancing and food, two of our top favorite things, right? So I love kind
Yeah.
of combining the food and dancing a little bit. And then most recently, Birdcage at Lebanite. I was very honored that they approached me when the person doing Sunday nights, Neil Aileen, was finished. He'd been there, I think, 10 years doing his party, and he was director of nightlife and just, wanted to step down. And then, as you mentioned, over the years, I've had two very big, sort of, as I call them, series or one offs. I did Trippin' on the Moon and a party called Keep on Dancing,
Yep.
both odes to the two favorite clubs that we spoke about. Tripping
Yep.
on the Moon was in remembering the music of the saint, and Keep on Dancing was in memory of Mel Sharon, who was
Yes.
owner of West End Records and a huge pioneer in the AIDS activism arena.
And
So I did both
also,
of those parties for a couple of years. I'm overdue to do both of them.
yes, and also Mel, a part of the Paradise Garage in
Correct. That was my next thing,
partnership
right?
with Mike Brody. And yeah, you are overdue to do
I'm overdue. It's
your
fine.
garage party.
I did
So
them both at Santos Playhouse, which
that
closed.
was
And
a great venue.
it
I
was an
enjoyed that
awesome
venue a
venue. I
lot.
really miss it. But yeah, Keep on Dancing was for Mel and faceted toward the Paradise Garage, and all that was all for AIDS. And major DJs came to play for that, and
Yeah.
Robert Owens came to perform from London. I mean, people really come together for that sort of thing. And then the Trippin' on the Moon was off with the Saint DJs.
Yeah, but Mel was such a beloved person both
Yeah,
in the industry and in the community that you did have such an incredible outpouring.
yeah.
I'd like to see that party return on a personal note.
Yeah, no, I'm really overdue to
It
do
was such
both
a
of them.
sweet
So speaking about them has prompted me that I really need to do both.
good, good.
Yeah,
Well, I hope to be able to do lights again at another one of your
yeah,
parties.
you know,
Every one I've done has been an absolute delight so far.
you know it, you know it.
Indeed, indeed. And Christina, where can people find you these days? I know I've been running a social media banner under the bottom here that has you, I think, on Facebook and Instagram. Yes, are these
That's
good?
correct. My Instagram is just my name with Christina_Visca and Christina Visca on Facebook. They're both open accounts.
And I assume when we get more info on updated events, that's where you'll be posting them, and that's where we can follow you.
Absolutely.
And I would love to have you back on another visit, and hopefully,
Oh, I
when
would
you
love to. I could talk to you for hours. Well, funny
well,
people, you and I speak on the phone often, right? And we're like, oh my God, we've been on for 2 hours.
well, that's how it is with a friend.
Exactly.
It's easy. It's very easy, and you've been an absolute delight. I'm very honored that you shared some of your insight into the heartbeat. You bring a perspective that's a different perspective. You organize, you put together the pieces that contribute to the other pieces that need to be put together to make the whole. While you yourself don't create the musical journey, you provide the tools and the space and the mechanism for that
That's
freedom of artistry to flourish. And you know,
that's
it
right.
takes
I
a
allow
village. It
right.
takes a village, and some of the, I think, most successful venues parties that I've ever worked at, it has not been one component or another that made it. It was a little bit of everything, and you were part of a family, and that's how you felt, very much part of a family.
We're all artists in our own way, right? But especially coming for a DJ, I really feel like they need to just be the artist, walk into the booth and do their thing. A lot of I know we're almost over, but a lot of DJs, which is great. They're in the business end of it. They're promoters now, and I love it. They're multifaceted, which is great. But I also think it's nice when a DJ could just be the artist sometimes.
Yes, I agree with you. And I think that when the artist is given restraints by the owner or whomever, they're just hurting the possible outcome and positivity that event could
Right,
be.
right.
You have to let it go. You have to let it flow. And sometimes that flow is not something that's pre-constructed, as you have used the word. It's very true. It's organic. It's pure. It happened on its own. It grew. It's organic. And that is sometimes the best of all possible worlds.
Absolutely. Yep, I agree. I agree.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. Well, Christina, it has been an
Okay.
absolute pleasure.
You
We can
too.
find you on your social media sites. I want to have you back. We're also going to have everything posted with links on the website, Heartbeat of the Dance Floor, which is
I
now
love
running across the bottom. So there'll be links to all of our podcasts, and yours will be up just as soon as I can.
I love it. And I'm so proud of you that you're doing this. I couldn't think of a better person.
Oh, thank you so very much. That
Okay.
really
So
means a
easy. I
lot.
mean, you're my friend, but you're so easy to talk to and know all the right questions. And, Marsha Stern, nightlife historian. I love it.
Well,
Who would have
thank you.
thought?
Yeah, right? Who would have
I love
thunk?
it.
Who would have thunk is right.
I
Hey,
love
it has
it.
been a delight, and thank you. Thank you
Marsha,
very,
thank
very
you for
much, my
having me
dear.
on. I had a ball. Thank you.
Me too.
Bye.
Come back anytime.
Well, thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye, darling.
Bye. Bye.